This is the Kika. This is the 2019 vintage. So Kika is my third child. She's the youngest, and I decided in 2008 when she was born to make a sweet wine named after her. I'm a huge fan of sweet wines. I think in South Africa we produce some of the best sweet wines in the world, and they're always very intriguing wines, and they sort of really deliver great character when they're made well. And this wine in particular is a Chenin Blanc made from Botrytis grapes. So it's a Noble 8 harvest, quite different in style to straw wines, which are quite prevalent in South Africa, and quite tricky to make because you have to wait for Botrytis cinerea, the mold, to grow on the grapes and concentrate the fruit. So this vineyard is based on Simonsberg. It's at a bit of elevation. 2019 is the first year I used this vineyard because the previous vineyard I used to use was pulled out. It's sitting at about 380 meters above sea level. 2019 was a beautiful vintage for Botrytis. We were very lucky. We had a lot of, it wasn't easy to make the dry wines because there was a lot of rot in the vineyards, but obviously that assisted with the mold that develops on the grapes to produce Botrytis wine. So just to sort of give you an indication, I was given 1 hectare of this vineyard. Well, I contracted 1 hectare of this vineyard to go to Botrytis. We had to wait, so that 1 hectare would have probably given us about 9 tons of grapes for if you had to make a dry Chenin Blanc. By the time I picked it, I ended up with 2.6 tons of fruit, so we ended up with less than 30% of what was originally hanging. When I pressed it, I ended up with about 1,300 liters. So less, again, 50% less than what of the fruit that we brought in. So we're looking at about 40% recovery. And by the time we bottled it, we're probably sitting with, we eventually bottled 3,000 half bottles. So that would be equivalent to 1,500 normal 750ml bottles, where if you had have just picked it for dry grapes, for dry wine, you would have ended up with probably closer to 6,000 bottles. So you're looking at about 20% less in volume. But it produces these wines with great concentration. So this Kika is around 12% alcohol, has around 180 grams of sugar. You're looking at an acidity of close to 9, which is really, for me, the secret in these wines. They need to be in balance. So a lot of the straw wines are sitting with close to 300 grams of sugar. This is a little over half of that. So the wine has less of a cloying, syrupy, sweet character. It's got a lot of a fresher character. And that comes from the Botrytis also gives you that beautiful elegance and almost dried apricot character that you get from the wine. And then the acidity counterbalances this sweetness. And so the wine actually finishes with almost a dryness to the wine and not a cloying sweetness. And I think that's very important when it comes to making these sweet wines, is balance. And again, if I had an alcohol of 13.5, the alcohol would be sticking out and would be adding to the sweetness of the wine and the heat of the wine. But this wine has none of that. It's made with a bit of skin contact, so we crush the bunches whole bunch. The grapes are left to soak for about 5 days before I press. And we press that to barrel and let the fermentation start naturally. And normally this wine will stop fermentation on its own because of the balance of sugar and alcohol. In around August, I normally bottle the wine, and then it spends another 6 to 8 months in bottle before it's released. And they're very tricky wines to make, and obviously you need the right conditions to make them. But they're wines that really over-deliver on flavor and intensity. And a lot of people mistakenly would try and pair these wines with quite sweet desserts. In my experience, they pair best with hard cheeses. Drink them on their own as a dessert, or you always need, if you are going to serve it with a dessert, you need to serve it with a dessert with some good amount of fruit or citrus or good zestiness and good freshness in the wine, because too much sweetness is going to completely dominate the wine. So my perfect dish for this is a tarte tatin would be fantastic. Yesterday for lunch we had crepes Suzettes, which is crepes with citrus syrup. Something like a panna cotta is beautiful with this wine, as long as it's not too creamy. Or just on its own with some cheese is a perfect pairing with this wine.